Beijing has reached a conclusion regarding its course of action. Following several days of issuing warnings about potential countermeasures and encouraging Washington to engage in negotiations and meet China halfway, it has opted to respond, at least by threatening to, impose its own tariffs. China announced that it would enforce a 15% tariff on coal and liquefied natural gas products, along with a 10% tariff on crude oil, agricultural machinery, and large engine vehicles imported from the United States effective from February 10th. This date is significant as it indicates that there remains an opportunity for the two largest economies in the world to avert a trade conflict. According to the White House, the two leaders have arranged a call for later this week, and there are indications that, despite today's announcements, China is receptive to dialogue and is leaving the possibility for discussions open. China's countermeasures are relatively limited in comparison to Donald Trump's imposition of a 10% tariff on all Chinese imports to the United States. While the United States is the leading exporter of liquefied natural gas globally, China represents only about 2.3% of those exports, with its primary automobile imports coming from Europe and Japan. This strategic and selective approach to targeting specific goods may serve as an initial maneuver by Beijing, which is aimed at enhancing its bargaining position and influence in the forthcoming negotiations. Chinese officials may find encouragement in the amicable beginning of the U.S.-China relationship since Trump's inauguration. The U.S. president remarked on having a very good conversation with President Xi just days before his inauguration, which was notably attended by the highest-ranking Chinese official ever present at such an event. He has also expressed a desire to collaborate with Xi on addressing the conflict in Ukraine. President Xi may prefer to avoid confrontation with Trump at this juncture as he focuses on stabilizing his own struggling economy. This scenario is familiar to both leaders, although they may be reluctant to revisit previous experiences. There was a period of improved relations between the US and China during Trump's previous term, which ultimately deteriorated. It will be considerably more challenging for Trump to negotiate with China compared to Mexico and Canada, largely depending on his specific demands from Beijing. China stands as Washington's primary economic competitor, and severing its connections to significant supply chains has been a key objective of the Trump administration. Should Trump make excessive demands, Xi may prefer the option to disengage, and there will be constraints on how much pressure he is willing to endure. The current US president is contending with a China that exhibits a greater confidence than in previous years. Beijing has broadened its global influence and is now the leading trade partner for over 120 nations. In the last 20 years, China has consistently worked to diminish the role of trade in its economy while enhancing domestic production. Presently, imports and exports constitute approximately 37% of China's GDP, which is a decrease from over 60% in the early 2000s, as reported by the Council on Foreign Relations. While a 10% tariff will have an impact, Beijing may believe it can withstand this challenge for the time being. The concern lies in whether President Trump is genuinely intent on increasing that tariff rate to the 60% he promised during his campaign, or if he will persist in utilizing the threat of tariffs as a recurring diplomatic strategy to pressure Xi. In anticipation of such developments, Beijing will need to formulate a clear strategy to address potential escalations. The previous agreement signed by leaders did not yield favorable results. In 2018, both nations implemented reciprocal tariffs on goods that were valued at hundreds of billions of dollars. This situation persisted for over 2 years, resulting in China's commitment to increase its annual purchase of U.S. goods by an additional $200 billion in 2020. The expectation from Washington was that this agreement would reduce the significant trade deficit from China. However, the onset of the COVID pandemic disrupted this plan, and the deficit currently stands at $361 billion as reported by Chinese customs data. China faces significant challenges as it strategically considers future negotiations. Currently, Beijing exports nearly 4 times the amount of goods to the United States compared to its imports, and during the first term of Trump's presidency, it exhausted its options for targeted items. Experts suggest that China is now contemplating a broader array of responses beyond tariffs should the trade conflict escalate. Time is of the essence. While a full-scale trade war has not yet commenced, global businesses are closely monitoring the situation to determine whether the two leaders can achieve a resolution later this week.